Well, we're back again with another episode of CT Chronicles, the Supplier Edition, brought to you by Corporate Traveller, where you get the ins and outs and business travel trends from all our suppliers. And I'm talking air, accommodation, car hire, and even travel insurance. And joining us today is Wilson Tyro, Country Manager, Southern Africa, AirFrance KLM. Wilson, thank you so much for making the time to chat to me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Wilson, I've been excited to talk about air for a long time now. And I'm really keen to pick up, in terms of business travel, when we started to see the numbers sort of start picking up in international aviation, there was a lot of friction at the airport around staff shortages, etc. Have we seen any progress in terms of how that's moved along?
Well, I think a lot changed during COVID. One of the biggest challenges that we had was the new restrictions that came along. But also during COVID, one of the biggest challenges we had as an airline is the infrastructure around the airports. A lot of people working at the airports found alternative jobs, and getting them back into the airport at the quick pace that we saw the business coming back was really a challenge.
Yeah. Can you talk me through, what the pricing model started to look like?
But what we saw at the time that the restrictions were lifted were these huge spike of travel that just came up there. And that, of course, meant that the available capacity in the market was not enough to cater to the number of passengers traveling. Demand was so much more higher than supply that we had seen prices that we've never seen for the last couple of years.
What does that mean for a South African business traveler? Would they expect to pay a lot more for airfare?
So we have not changed our prices in terms of a comparison from euro to South African rands.
Yeah.
So that does not have an impact yet, because we see that the demands are still very solid. We expect it to stay that way. But of course, there will be a tipping point at some point where we expect it to stabilize.
Yeah. So on the agenda right now, we've got sustainability topping the charts. Can you talk me through your guys' progress on the topic of sustainability?
If you look at the global air travel today, 3% of the global emissions are coming in from air travel. And that's quite a lot. And this number is expected to double or triple in the years to come. From an AirFrance KLM point of view, we have 3 strategic pillars that we work on. One of them is modernization of our fleet. We would like to have 30% less CO2 emissions per customer by 2030. And we want to use a blended fuel between fossil fuel and sustainable fuel by 2030, 10% of that. And our ambition as a company is by 2050, we want to be a carbon neutral company.
Yeah. Do we think where sustainability is concerned, there might be sort of legislative implications and operations for private companies? Or
so one of the things that we do as a company is obviously work very closely with our European governments to make sure that we comply with the regulations that comes along with that. The expectation is that for short haul connections, we can then work with the railway companies in the different countries and offer people the option of connecting with their air flight.
Yeah. How are we giving customers visibility on their sustainable sort of practices?
So we engage with our customers. So what we do from a corporate traveler point of view is we engage with them and we offer them the option of contributing to the sustainable aviation fuel.
Okay.
Because the sourcing of sustainable aviation fuel is not as easy as the fossil fuel. The price of SAF, which is a sustainable fuel, is nearly 3 to 4 times more expensive than the fossil fuel. So it's a very thin balance of how do we want to make sure that we keep these ambitions alive, but at the same time, keep that price point which is acceptable to the customer.
What is demand looking like right now for AirFrance and KLM? Has it increased, or have you seen slight decreases out of the South African market?
So in the South African context, the demand today is bigger than what it was in 2019.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's really good for the business, because when you talk about air travel, you also talk about tourism in general. When people travel, there's obviously hotels, there's tour operators, a whole lot of people that benefit from this.
Yeah.
So with the restrictions being lifted last year by South Africa, we saw a huge spike in demand, and not necessarily only to one or two specific markets, but globally. So we see that Europe is back to pre-COVID levels, which I think is great for the industry, because travel industry supports the bigger tourism sector. So you have the hotel industry that benefits from it, but also tour operators and little businesses that contributes towards this.
Yeah. Talk to me about the value for money perks potentially versus your competitors that is offered by AirFrance KLM.
So if you think about how we do our pricing, or what is our pricing strategy, we always try to benchmark our competitors and try to stay relevant in terms of the value proposition that we have. As a company, we continue to invest in new products. So for South Africa, we have a new business class suite that's been introduced on AirFrance. On the KLM side, we will also introduce the business class suite. This will be on the South African routes as of later this year. But you also have, from a customer point of view, the choice of choosing different products. And I think this is really where the travel industry is shaping up for the future, really depending on what the individual needs are. But we're also unbundling our fares, which means that you have the option of choosing a fare without a bag and then adding, for instance, your meals or your seat selection, a lot of things. So the airline retailing is going through a big change because we want to pass on this back to our customer to make that choice himself.
Very interesting, and I love that you talk about the future piece, and which takes me to my next question around AI. Talk to me about how it potentially could influence your industry.
I think AI is the future. If you think about the travel industry itself, it took us 100 years to reach to the number of passengers that we carry today. In the next 20 to 30 years, this number is going to double. We have been using AI specifically when it comes to our customer care questions. So KLM on one side is quite a front runner, and if we have to cater to the growing travelers, we need to make sure that there's information available at every touch point.
I've got another question, probably off topic. Whenever I fly, I'm always interested in the meals that I get offered. What's the staple meal that you'll get potentially offered AirFrance KLM?
Yeah, I mean that's a very interesting question, because obviously when you think about an airline meal, you think of chicken or beef.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But what we have done over the past few years is also a whole lot of different options. So we cater, of course, to different religious groups, but you can also request vegetarian meal or seafood meal, different choices based on individual dietary requirements.
Yeah, interesting. Another question potentially that a lot of corporates might have in mind is around safety. Talk to me about what advancements are made around making sure that all passengers are safe.
The two topics that are really important for us, it's part of our DNA, is safety and security. There's no compromise for safety and security. It's paramount for us. We make sure that our aircrafts are well maintained. We have dedicated engineers on the ground here in Johannesburg and also in Cape Town who make sure that once our aircraft arrives, these aircrafts are checked and they're airworthy to fly away.
Yeah. Wilson, I'd like to thank you so much. That's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining me for the CT Chronicles, and I think quite an insightful discussion. Well, that was an episode of CT Chronicles, the Supply Edition, with our partner, AirFrance KLM. Thank you and see you next time.